Georgia currently leads the crystal ball with a month or so to go. So let's get some more info about this big decision and hit the Wiltfong Whiparound with our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, in the month of June, Bolden took officials to Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, also went to Florida State. You can't rule out Auburn in this one either. So you have one of those Georgia crystal balls. So where's your confidence level in the Dogs ahead of this decision?
Well, I'm confident that Georgia is one of the major players in this recruitment, but I think that they have some major company at the top of the list. The official visit to Ohio State the weekend of June 16th was a major needle mover in that recruitment. He's very familiar with Ohio State. He visited twice during the fall for their win over Notre Dame and then returned later in the year and has a great relationship with Perry Eliano over there. Coach Day, on his official visit, spent time with Chase Young. He said he got some advice from Chase Young that he'll apply to his everyday life. Ohio State's got a lot of momentum on the recruiting trail right now. KJ Bolden, there's people that spent time with him that think he'll ultimately end up at Ohio State. But Georgia, definitely still in the thick of that one. That's where my crystal ball remains as we talk about it here. Auburn's going to get a visit here at the end of July. They kind of surged into this recruitment with a couple visits in the spring, including Auburn's spring game. And then Alabama, that was his last official visit. He said in the past, Bama's legendary. You're always going to get the best coaching. Who wouldn't want to play under Coach Nick Saban? He said in the past as well. So the schools I'm looking the hardest at right now, you got Georgia, you got Ohio State, then you got Alabama in there, and then Auburn getting a visit in July before he announces his college decision. So still some runway in this recruitment with the decision date and the finish line in sight.
Steve, let's stick with Georgia. You crystal balled a couple top 24/7 offensive linemen to the Bulldogs recently, Marquez Easley and Daniel Calhoun. You also have a crystal ball out for Nair Daniels to go to Georgia. What's your confidence level for these three prospects ultimately ending up in Athens?
Well, Georgia, the nation's #1 ranked recruiting class right now, just had a big recruiting win, landing Michael Luini at the position, a guy we thought at one point was heading to Michigan. Now in Athens, Georgia in position to sign one of the best offensive line classes in the country. I like where they stand with all three of these guys, all set to come off the board in the near future. Daniel Calhoun, I think at most of this process, it was Georgia and Alabama at the top of his list. Also looked hard at Tennessee and Texas and Auburn, but loved Georgia there. Marquez Easley made the rounds, but I think his official visit the second weekend of June alongside Daniel Calhoun was a tone setter in that one. Loved Georgia there. And then Nair Daniels, who also took his official visits to Florida State and Rutgers. I think that he ultimately is Georgia bound too. It's going to be a big, physical, massive offensive line class for Georgia this cycle. I like where they stand with all three of these guys, and I think that'd be a heck of a finish for them at the point of attack this cycle.
And your crystal ball put in some overtime this weekend. You also put one in for Texas to land the #7 player in 2024 in 5-star wide receiver Ryan Wingo. So what is it that have you leaning Longhorns for one of the top uncommitted prospects?
Yeah, so this recruitment's obviously had some movement at the top of the board. We've liked Tennessee. We've liked Georgia. Now we like Texas. He took his official visits in June to Georgia, Michigan, Texas, and Missouri. And I think his experience in Austin, getting a chance to sit down with Coach Sarkisian and Coach Jackson and that staff, seeing the offense, seeing the success that quarterbacks and receivers have had under Coach Sarkisian, and then just the time spent in Texas. It was his second time on campus. I think as this process continues, that program is the bar moving forward. He also had a really good visit to Missouri, so I would put Missouri in the 2 slot right now, but he's going to be back at Tennessee in July. They're certainly still very much in the thick of this. He's going to go down to Texas A&M in July. He may even get over to Kansas State. And he's going to take some officials in the fall, so still some runway to go here. But Texas setting the pace right now in the recruitment of Ryan Wingo. They're in great shape for a lot of 5 stars. Colin Simmons, as well, Terry Bussey, as you talked about at the top, Kobe Black. So Texas, 2 top 5 classes in a row, in good spot right now to add Ryan Wingo this cycle.
Steve, we know you have the spatula prop. We might need to get you a crystal ball as well with how many you've been flowing out there. You and Brian Doan teamed up to put a crystal ball in for Ohio State to land 5-star edge Dylan Stewart, and this is a huge recruitment, and Ohio State and the Buckeyes continue to surge there. What gives you confidence in that crystal ball prediction?
Well, talking to several sources with knowledge of this recruitment, including people that he spent time with, at Ohio State the weekend of June 16th. It sounds like Ohio State is in phenomenal position for Dylan Stewart. Him and his mom both like Larry Johnson. They like the track record of the program. Spent some time talking with Chase Young on his visit. But a question that he had with Ohio State was, how are they going to use me on his official visit? They were able to explain he's going to be a stand-up outside guy, someone that could be a difference maker for them coming off the edge in that fashion. And so I think he really likes what Ohio State's doing schematically. But look, just because the predictions on Ohio State right now is the Buckeyes are in the thick of it to maybe unseat Georgia for the #1 class. Now they need some things to go their way, but they are in the mix for that. South Carolina very much in the mix for Dylan Stewart as well. Took his official the weekend of June 23rd. He's expected back at South Carolina at the end of July for their big recruiting event. So still a lot of time here in the Dylan Stewart sweepstakes. Perhaps Miami's not going to go away there. Alabama and Maryland rounding out the top 5. But my crystal ball is on Ohio State. So's Brian Doan's. But we are definitely not ruling out South Carolina as his process continues.
And Steve, the chat is going nuts with all of these crystal balls. We actually have a question here. Once again, you cannot be a part of the chat unless you subscribe to the channel. Highly recommend it. Also, yep, you see it there. Hit that like button if you have not already. I'm going to ask you a question here. This one comes from Moto. Do the Buckeyes pull Dylan Stewart out of Georgia, or does Dylan Raiola pull him to Georgia? I know you talked a little bit about you throwing the crystal ball out for the Buckeyes there, but where do you like kind of the Buford connection here between these two prospects?
So is he asking about Edric Houston, the defensive lineman from Buford? I think that's who he met, right?
Yeah.
Which we like Ohio State for Edric Houston. You know, we have an article on 24/7 Sports right now talking about the Buckeyes' roadway to perhaps finishing with the #1 class. He's one of the crystal balls that I'm very confident in right now. I think Ohio State is the one to beat for Edric Houston. They got a great shot at his teammate KJ Bolden. We have them crystal ball for Dylan Stewart right now, the 5-star edge rusher. But again, we're not sleeping on South Carolina there, and Miami's certainly not going to go away. But Edric Houston, he's got an announcement in August. We like Ohio State there to land him as they put together what is going to be maybe the best defensive line class in the country, winning out for Justin Scott. Great spot for Dylan Stewart. Get Edric Houston. Maybe Marquise Lightfoot at the end of the show. I know we're going to talk about him shortly. But Ohio State, they're putting together a heck of a haul, and I like them for Edric Houston.
All right, before we get to Lightfoot, I got to ask about the 3-star cornerback, Amari Sanders. He hasn't taken an official visit since his June visit to Nebraska. That's also where the crystal balls favor for him to land. But you've actually reported that he's eyeing a couple of trips potentially during the month of July. What's the latest with his recruitment?
Well, I just think that Matt Rule, Evan Cooper, and that Nebraska staff set the tone in this recruitment the first weekend of June with his official visit. He gushed about it, getting around the other recruits. He's really clicked with guys like Ja'Cory Barney, who picked Nebraska over Miami this week. Mario Buford, some of the guys in the class he's really hit it off with. He talked about the standard of that program and the environment around Lincoln and the opportunities that town presents to their football players. All those things have set the tone in this recruitment. And then he has relationships with guys that are already on the team from the state of Florida. So I think he's very comfortable there. He is a priority top target for Nebraska. So Matt Rule and company are recruiting. He's a 5-star on their board. And so I think it's up to another program to change where that recruitment stands right now. You know, Nebraska, they got one of the top recruiting classes in the country right now. And this is another guy that they would love to add to a haul that ranks number 14 nationally per 24/7 Sports.
Steve, there were nearly 500 commitments during the month of June. We've got 2 more coming up here on the show in a few minutes. Marquise Lightfoot, the 4-star defensive end, and as well as Elijah Rushing later this week. What is your read on these 2 recruitments as they approach the finish line?
Well, Blair, I'm going to talk about Lightfoot first because I want you to chime in on Rushing because you're an expert close to that one. But for Lightfoot, we loved Ohio State coming out of his official visit there earlier this month. They had to get through official visits to USC, Illinois, and then Miami on the back end. And there was even some chatter coming out of those visits to USC and Illinois that maybe you shouldn't feel great about that Ohio State prediction. but Miami was a program that he fell in love with on a visit before his official visit. Jason Taylor, the opportunity to learn under Coach Taylor, a program on the rise under Coach Cristobal, who's got a track record for turning programs around. Alan True and I have been working this story the last couple days, and the intel now favors the Hurricanes. We got the last official visit to land Marquise Lightfoot when he announces on the show later in the day. Miami defensive line is their biggest focus here this cycle, and Marquise Lightfoot is one of the most coveted players on their board, regardless of position. You see the 122 tackles, 9 sacks, forced fumble. He's a relentless, athletic, high upside football player with a lot of developmental upside physically. And then with Elijah Rushing, he's committing next Monday. He's committing on the 6th. Like Oregon there, Blair, we've heard some Arizona stuff, Arizona hanging around in that recruitment. And maybe there's been times where they felt good around that program. But the buzz still favors Oregon, in my opinion, as the Ducks try and continue with the top 10 class here. Where do you stand on Elijah Rushing?
A fascinating recruitment, Steve. He obviously took official visits during the month of June, made it out to Tennessee to wrap things up, also hit it to Notre Dame. This does have the feel of a West Coast recruiting battle between those two schools that you mentioned. And, the thing is that Arizona needs a win like this. Oregon needs a win like this. I think he's such an important and pivotal prospect for all these schools, and that's what's made this a really fascinating one to monitor here over the last couple months. But I'm excited to see where he goes, because this could be a huge domino. We talk a lot about the quarterback dominoes, but this could be a really, really impactful dominoing when it comes to those edge rushers out west and nationally as well.
Yeah, looking forward to bringing you his commitment on Thursday. Steve, thank you as always for the great intel. Here it is, Elijah Rushing. We will bring you his live commitment. The 5-star edge is the number 8 player in the class. The Arizona kid will choose between Oregon, Arizona, Tennessee, and Notre Dame. Join us on Thursday's show at 5 o'clock Eastern to find out where Elijah Rushing is headed.